Hey, I'm Phil from Liberty Church and welcome to Liberty Online. Thanks for joining us today. Please do let us know where you are watching from in the comments section below, whether that's from here in Thetford or across the pond in the USA. We'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure you stick around right to the end today as we have some brilliant news for you about launching our new speed services. Well, the band are going to kick us off this morning before we finish up our two-part message series called Battles. So why not try and disturb your neighbours by turning up the TV or your device speakers right up as we head over to the stage for my favourite song, Reckless Love.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your fault, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I feel no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. don't deserve it, still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
So we're back here for week 2 of the series called Battles. And we said last week that some battles we have no choice about, like, for instance, COVID, we just had to get on and battle it, whilst other battles we choose. And I said last week, if you missed it, that I asked the people in this room and people at home, what battles are you not fighting that you should? Or I put it this way, what giant are you backing down from? And this week I want to ask essentially the opposite question, which is, what battle are you fighting that you shouldn't? What battles in your life are you fighting that you shouldn't? What fight are you picking that doesn't need picking? What battle have you joined into that you've got no business being in? And so I'm going to pick up where we left off last week, where David, this little smelly cheese boy, defeated this massive dude Goliath from the Philistine army. And he cut his head off, if you remember, and everyone was celebrating. After that point, they went back and everyone was celebrating. Everyone but one person, and that was King Saul, which was David's king, the king of the Israelites. So let's read in 1 Samuel 18, 6-9. It says this: When David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, playing songs of joy on timbrels. The women sang as they played and said, Saul has killed his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Then Saul became very angry. This saying did not please him. He said, they have given David honor for 10,000. He killed one dude. They gave him honor for 10,000s, but for me only thousands. Now what more can we have but to be king? It says, now what more can he have, but to be king? And it says this in verse 9, and Saul was jealous and did not trust David from that day on. And if you go to church and you know the story about this, in short, King Saul spent around 2 decades, creating and entering into battles with David, who only ever wanted the best for his king. He created these battles from nowhere. Saul constantly created and fought battles he should not have fought. And I think sometimes that sometimes, perhaps you, but we create battles we shouldn't fight to distract us from the battles that we should. I think we create battles that we have no purpose to fight for. There's no reason why we should be fighting. We create battles we shouldn't fight to distract us from the battles that we should. And King Saul, you know who he should have been fighting? And some of you might think, well, the Philistines. That's who, they were the enemy at the time. They should have been fighting him. Not for me. The person he should have been fighting was his ego. That was his battle. His battle wasn't with David. His battle was with his own ego, battling against his own pride, not David. He was fighting the wrong man. He should have been battling self. And I think what Saul done, you can glean from the text, is that he manufactured a battle where there was none. Through jealousy of David, he manufactured a battle where there was none. And he stopped looking in the mirror and dealing with his own insecurity and pride, because this was his battle, his problem. The real giant that needed slaying. And so what Saul should have done perhaps, and what I need to do, and perhaps what sometimes you need to do, is ask yourself, what battle are you fighting that you have no business fighting? And perhaps more importantly, what real battles are they distracting you from? What battles are you fighting that you have no business fighting? And more importantly, what real battles are they distracting you from that you should be fighting? You see, David was the opposite end of the spectrum. He, on the other hand, refused to fight time after time. He refused to enter battles with his king. And one time when Saul was chasing after him, this happened time and time again, but Saul chased him off and they were after him. Saul's army were chasing down David's men and they were in the mountains, and David and his men just happened to be camping in this particular cave and just having a rest. And Saul and his army arrived out the front of that cave. And so the king was like, hold on, boys, just got to pop to the loo. And so he went into this cave alone, without any guards or anything like that. He went in to go to the loo. We'll read from 1 Samuel 24:3. I know you're really engaged now because I'm talking about someone going to the loo. So it says this from verse 3. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. And the men said to David, they said, this is the day the Lord spoke of, when he said that he'll give you your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. They obviously had to be quiet, otherwise Saul would have heard them. Then David crept up behind him unnoticed, and he cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And so then Saul leaves the cave, he goes back to his men, and when they're at a distance, David comes out and shouts basically, "Oi, Saul!" He said, look, he's basically waving the thing saying, look, I don't want a battle. There isn't a battle here. Jump down to verse 8. It says this, see, my father, look at that respect. He even saying my father to this guy, see, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I'm guilty of any wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. And what happened next just blows my mind. It really does. Because Saul, essentially, the long and short, we haven't got time to go into it, but he wept, he cried, and he was sorry. And he even said about David, you're a better man than me. He knew that in that moment, I would have taken your life happily. I'd have entered into that battle that didn't need entering. He says, you're a better man than me. And he's essentially was saying, we won't fight today, but I'm going to battle you another day. Even though out of his own mouth it came, even though I know I'm going to lose, and I know God is with you, and you're going to be king one day, I'm still going to enter that battle. Talk about fighting a battle that you shouldn't be fighting. So I ask you again, what battle are you fighting that you shouldn't be fighting? What battle are you fighting that you shouldn't? What battles in your life that you've been struggling with or putting time and energy into that's consuming you do you need to walk away from? What battles do you need to wave a little white flag in or simply walk away? What battles have you found yourself in that's distracting you from facing the battle you're supposed to be fighting, whatever that is for you? And so like last week, I gave you a little rugby story. I thought I'd do the same. You can tell I'm missing it. I retired quite a few years ago now. But during my playing years of rugby, and I played rugby for like 20 years, I refused, and all my teammates would tell you that this is me. I refused to get drawn into fights on the rugby pitch. Just won't happen. And when you played for Thetford, especially when I was younger, you had like 10, 15 fights every game. But I refused to get drawn into them fights, the fisticuffs, the brawls. And I noticed it often was happening when we were beaten in opposition. They'd try and fight. They're just probably out of frustration, but it, for me, was a distraction. I understood that that's not a battle that I need to enter into. I'm big enough and tough enough, I could have done, but it wasn't a battle that I needed to enter into. For me, we were already playing the world's most aggressive sport. Let's just play the game that we've come to play. Let's come and play rugby instead of fighting. We can play within the rules. Let's play the game we're here to play instead of the opposition or the enemy distracting us to battle and fight in a way that we're not here to do. And again, this is a glowing example of my wonderfulness of not entering into battles and fighting. But, however, often in my life, I've fought battles that didn't need fighting. I've picked fights where they didn't need picking. I can easily be drawn into pointless battles. And even today, I can easily be drawn into pointless battles with my kids that are pointless. I had an argument with my 4-year-old girl this morning about whether they were Cocoa Pops or Cocoa Snaps. It was like a 4-minute conversation and her getting upset. That really didn't need to happen. And that's a silly one, but we so often deal with serious things in our lives. We battle, we enter into battles that have no utility, that have no use, no good outcome. Why? Probably because of pride. just like Saul. You know, me, you, it's pride in us often. We enter into battles because we need to win them for whatever reason, even if God's not calling us to fight them battles. And to finish, you know, funny enough, when you read the text before this story, the reason Saul was replaced as king was because he entered into a battle that without God's blessing. If you know the story or not, he tried to bless a battle himself before the prophet Samuel had arrived to bless the battle, if you like, to bless over this particular battle. So his demise as king was predicated on the fact that he attempted to enter a battle that he shouldn't have entered. That's the reason he wasn't allowed to be king anymore, king over Israel, because he tried to enter a battle that he shouldn't have entered, that was not in God's plan or timing. So I want to ask you, are you fighting battles you should not be fighting? Because perhaps they're distracting you from the battles you should be concentrating on. And I want to say, don't let them distract you from the battles that God wants you to fight and to have victory in. Because remember, he has never lost a battle. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today for Liberty Online. But the good news is you will not have to join us online for very much longer. That's right, you can join us here in person at the Carnegie Rooms from Sunday, the 6th of September. Yep, that's right, we're launching our speed services in 2 weeks' time. We'll give you more details of them next week. If you have never been to Liberty Church before, we would love to meet you, so why not come along on one of those days? Make sure you can join us online next Sunday as Phil brings a message called Brain Hack. I can't wait for it. Have a great week, guys. Bye.